quote, space as a distinct operational domain of national military power, unquote. Now, long ago, our adversaries determined that space is vital to the joint forces operation, and they have spent the last several years developing counter-space weapons to threaten our troops. Both China and Russia have weaponized space, and we must catch up to contend with this new reality. Unfortunately, our governance structures present many hurdles to maintaining space superiority. We have redefined the space domain from a support function to a distinct operational domain, and the policies and directives that underpin who does what have not kept pace. Many of these internal documents were last updated a decade ago. A decade ago, we didn't have a Space Force, and SpaceX hadn't yet demonstrated a first stage landing. Technology and how we think about space has grown by leaps and bounds since then. For example, I am concerned about how we get space-based information into the hands of the warfighters on a tactically relevant timeline. Given the retirement of the JSTARS platform beginning in the mid-2020s, the department decided in the fiscal year 23 budget request to transition ground moving target indication, GMTI, from an air platform to a space-based capability. Since the NRO is procuring this new system, does that mean NGA should serve its traditional role as clearinghouse for joint force request of scarce national assets? Or as you, Mr. Calvelli, have argued, is this a purely Title X mission that needs to be tasked, owned, and operated by the Department of Defense? This is not a trivial bureaucratic turf war. What we decide here will set the pattern for how we handle the transition to space from other previously air-based missions. It won't surprise anyone to hear that this committee believes that the GMTI mission and any future systems to follow must be tasked and controlled by the Department of Defense. Last year's bill established the Moving Target Indication Working Group, co-chaired by the Space Force and the Joint Staff. So I look forward to hearing all of your perspectives on this esoteric but essential issue. Further, many of the technological advancements that are driving us to shift these missions to space are being developed by a cutting-edge commercial space industry. We now have companies that want to provide not only launch services and communications, but imagery and rendezvous and proximity operations. This committee has long been a proponent of taking as much advantage of these commercial capabilities as possible. I was glad to see your office, Dr. Plumb, and the Space Force released strategies to take advantage of these commercial developments last month. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses about how they are thinking about these commercial capabilities, and specifically how they plan to integrate them with the existing government architecture. In a world of limited budgets, it will become even more critical for the entire national security space enterprise to figure out how they leverage these commercial companies to improve. I now recognize Ranking Member Moulton for his opening comments.
Thank you, Chairman Lamborn, and welcome to our panel of witnesses. Before I begin my remarks, I also want to comment on Dr. Plumb. I was a little worried you were going to say it's his last public appearance ever, and we certainly hope that's not the case, because you've been an amazing public servant, and we've been very, very lucky to have you. I personally have learned a lot from you, and I was personally disappointed when you said you were going to leave, although you have every right to do what's right for your family. But we will miss you. You have helped turn around the space enterprise. I'm very confident with our course right now. I wasn't confident 5 years ago, and you've been a huge part of making that change. So thank you so much for your service. Our national security space architecture is undergoing a significant transformation, a transformation necessary because everyday American life is deeply reliant on space. The Global Positioning System, GPS, probably helped everyone in this room get somewhere today. And it also provides necessary timing information to nearly every banking and financial system worldwide. And it is no secret that most weapon systems in the Department of Defense inventory require a GPS signal as well. In part because of this over-reliance, our adversaries have been developing, deploying, and demonstrating capabilities in space and on Earth to deny, degrade, and destroy U.S. satellites. In just the past 2 years, the People's Republic of China has almost doubled their number of satellites on orbit to 400, with plans for nearly 1,000 by 2030. And they include capabilities with inherently offensive applications. And as we all know now, due to what was essentially an intelligence leak from Congress, Russia is developing a nuclear weapon in space. If launched, it would be in direct violation of the Outer Space Treaty, and if detonated, it would degrade or destroy nearly every satellite in its path. These advancements by our adversaries have required a transformation to a more proliferated, resilient, and protected U.S. architecture. In addition, the U.S. commercial market has exploded in the past 5 years. SpaceX is probably best known, but there are companies outpacing DoD in innovation across the board, whether that be in satellite communications, remote sensing, space domain awareness, or in developing capabilities to defend and protect our existing exquisite satellites on orbit today. While this subcommittee has been pushing both the DoD and intelligence community to fully embrace commercial capabilities, that culture shift has been met with considerable resistance. That is why I'm very encouraged by the release of both the DoD and Space Force commercial space strategies. It's not enough to simply award contracts. We must have a plan to fully integrate these innovative capabilities into government systems to help reinforce our national advantage in space. We also continue to make significant progress with our incredible network of allies and partners. The U.S. must continue to lead by example on establishing norms of behavior for responsible operations in space. Not to diminish this progress overall, there are some areas we should continue to watch closely. In addition to the pattern of large satellite programs being late and over budget, the ground system architecture still frequently comes as an afterthought. We've been notified yet again of delays of the next generation operational ground control segment, the modern cyber-secure ground system to operate GPS satellites. OCX was supposed to be delivered in 2016 for $3.9 billion. Now, 8 years later, and at almost double that cost, we are still waiting. Unfortunately, OCX is the most egregious case, but others such as Atlas are also experiencing delays in cost overruns. Mr. Calvelli, I would like to understand how you are addressing these issues holistically across the Space Force. Another area this subcommittee must watch is something the chairman mentioned, the jurisdictional divide between traditional space-based intelligence collection versus DoD's use of the domain for tactical applications. The latter is somewhat a new phenomenon. Tactical missions like surveillance of ground targets are now moving from land, sea, or air platforms into orbit. We must be sure that government policy does not assume that all space assets are formal intelligence or Title 50 assets, or we may accidentally block our combatant commanders from getting targeting information quickly enough to use it, or block the services from fully taking advantage of commercial imaging and sensing. Space is a fascinating and infinite domain. Until recently, we only really experienced it through the lens of science fiction. But in reality, space has been a part of our daily lives as Americans since the dawn of the space race, and our adversaries are keenly aware of that. Our warfighters everywhere, on the ground, under the sea, and in the air, depend on space. The global dependence on space often means relying on American satellites. We must keep them secure, not only against the threats we see today, but against what we will face in the years and decades to come. I look forward to today's discussion with our witnesses on how best to maintain U.S. superiority in space. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We now turn to our witnesses. Your prepared statements will be made part of the record, and it's doubtful that we'll be able to have the time to have a closed session because we do have votes in about 50 minutes. So we'll have time, though, to have a round of questions from ourselves as members of the committee, and then go from there. I would ask that you all keep your statements to 4 minutes or less rather than 5, just for the sake of time. Dr. Plumb, you're recognized.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Moulton. Distinguished members of the committee, appreciate this chance to testify one last time here, and this on the 25 space budget for the department. This is my last time testifying, hopefully not my last public appearance, sir. I will be departing later this month, but it has been a true privilege to serve, and I have been heartened by the bipartisan approach this committee has taken to space and to defense issues in particular. And I will say again, I've told you both personally, but thank you. It means a lot, and to the country, and I think one of the reasons we've been able to move forward so much is because of that bipartisan approach. So I deeply appreciate it. We're clearly in a time of rapid change in the space strategic environment, and it does not favor those who are slow or resistant to change. China and Russia are both rapidly fielding space and counter-space capabilities to hold the joint force at risk and to deny us the space-based services that we rely on. The scale and scope of these threats presents significant risks to the American people, to our national interests, and to our allies and partners. The President's fiscal year 25 budget requests $33.7 billion for space to help meet these challenges. Some of these critical investments include $2.4 billion for national security space launch, $1.5 billion for more resilient position navigation and timing, PNT, $4.2 billion for more resilient and protected SATCOM, as well as the Space Development Agency's proliferated low Earth orbit transport layer, $4.7 billion to develop new missile warning and missile tracking architectures, and then $12.3 billion for a range of other capabilities to increase resiliency of our existing architectures and to protect our interests in space during competition, in crisis, and in conflict. Now, in addition to these investments, I just wanted to touch on the significant progress we've made over the last 2 years on what has become 4 key strategy and policy priorities. I've detailed those in length in my written testimony, but space control, space cooperation, space classification, and commercial space integration. We have obtained presidential guidance to assure our space missions and protect and defend the joint force from space-enabled attacks. We have greatly expanded our space cooperation with allies and partners, charting a path towards true combined operations in space that will strengthen collective deterrence. We have overhauled the Department's space classification policy to remove unnecessary barriers to information flow throughout the joint force, barriers with our industry partners, and frankly, just barriers within the department alone. We have released the first ever DoD commercial space integration strategy to harness the sector's incredible innovation to enhance our resilience. Going forward, the department will continue to press on all 4 lines of effort. I believe the progress we have made and the foundation we have laid here will pay dividends for years to come. So in closing, and aware of the time, just thank you again to the committee for your partnership and your tireless dedication to the department and our service members. And I look forward to this hearing and to answering your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Calvelli, you're recognized.
Chairman Lambourne, Ranking Member Moulton, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to testify before you today. With the growing threats in space, we must continue to transform our space architecture to be more proliferated, more resilient, so that space can be always counted on during times of peace, crisis, or conflict. As the Service Acquisition Executive for Space, I am focused on driving speed into acquisitions and delivering programs on cost and schedule. I'd like to highlight some of the progress we've made in the past year since I last testified. Since the spring of 2023, the Space Development Agency has delivered 27 satellites to orbit, nearly all of them in around 3 years from contract award to launch. This includes 8 new missile warning, missile tracking satellites and 19 data transport satellites, and SDA recently demonstrated the first ever Link 16 network connection from space. The Space Rapid Capabilities Office completed and is in the process of fielding the first 11 of 24 low-cost transportable terrestrial satellite communications jammers. These jammers went from contract award to fielding in about 18 months. Meanwhile, Space System Command continues to make excellent progress modernizing both our missile warning and MIL-SATCOM architectures to be more resilient. Just a few weeks ago, Space Systems Command launched the first weather system follow-on microwave satellite to support the pivot to a more resilient, disaggregated hybrid weather architecture to meet warfighter needs. Last September, SSC Tactically Responsive Space Mission Victus Nox demonstrated the ability to go from factory floor to on-orbit operations in around 5 days. And since last April, there have been 7 national security space launches that delivered critical warfighting capabilities to orbit. In addition, we continue to take advantage of a strong space industrial base, including awarding contracts to non-traditional space companies and implementing our recently published commercial space strategy. Simultaneously, we are aggressively tackling challenging programs to get them over the finish line. We are focused on delivering the GPS Next Generation Operational Control segment, also known as OCX, and we are making progress towards getting the system ready to transition into operations in 2025. Another one of our challenging programs that was mentioned was Atlas. We've made significant progress since we broke it up into more manageable deliverables. The program is on schedule to incrementally deliver space domain awareness command and control capabilities next year to enabling decommissioning of SPADOC. We've also proven we can build small satellites quickly. However, as we begin to deliver the next tranche of SDA satellites this fall, getting the military services to adopt and use these satellites will be key. Doesn't matter how fast we build them if no one uses them. Likewise, our ability to maintain assured access to space for our space capabilities remains paramount, and launch providers must be ready to scale and meet the increasing demand. Finally, we are working to move programs out of special access program stovepipes, thanks to John and his space classification policy update in December. This will improve our ability to integrate space to support other domains and enable better sharing with our allies. As we continue to drive speed into our acquisitions, our job and our top priority needs to stay focused on delivering programs on cost and schedule. We're going to do this by, first, ensuring that our acquisition strategies and request for proposal documents are realistic and executable, by implementing a source selection strategy that leads to awarding contracts with achievable cost and schedule baselines. There's no better way to deliver on schedule than actually getting it right up front. And then once under contract, proactively managing the program to deliver that system that works and deliver it on cost and on schedule. Given the threats and the increased capabilities of our competitors, it is critical that we remain focused on delivering programs on cost and schedule. Thank you for your time today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Dr. Meink, you're recognized.
Chairman Lamborn, Ranking Member Moulton, and distinguished members of the committee, it's a pleasure to be here today before you. And it is also a pleasure to represent the people of the National Reconnaissance Office. For more than 60 years, the NRO has been developing tools and techniques that advance our national security. Today, we're building on a legacy to innovate and make the United States even safer and stronger. Space-based intelligence has become a primary, if not the primary, means of collection in denied areas. This is especially critical as our competitors are seeking to deny our strategic advantage in space. With Congress's support and with the continued innovation at the NRO, we will ensure America retains its strategic advantage in space. Our FY25 budget request aims to keep the United States a world leader in space-based intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. It prioritizes investments in a diverse and resilient constellation to meet the needs of the warfighter, intelligence community, and our allies. We are committed to using taxpayer dollars effectively and efficiently. I'm proud to report that the NRO has just received the 15th consecutive clean audit for fiscal year 2023. Our effectiveness and efficiencies are really a result of the Title 10 and Title 50 authorities that we have, as NRO is both the part of the defense intelligence enterprise and the intelligence community. Our investments in tools, technologies, both on the ground and on orbit, ensure our customers get the information they need, where they need it, faster than ever before. With the support of Congress, the NRO will continue to invest in government-engineered and industry-built satellites that are resilient by design, increasing partnerships that allow us to maximize our impact, and developing the world's most advanced tools, information technology, and communication networks, again, allowing us to fuse critical data and deliver it to our customers any place on Earth. Over the next decade, the NRO will continue to increase the number of satellites, both large and small, operating across multiple orbits. Later this month, around the 19th, the first phase of our proliferated architecture is scheduled to launch as NRO L-146 out of Vandenberg. We have already launched a number of demonstrations over the last few years to verify cost and performance, really to be comfortable and make sure we knew what we were doing. These systems will increase timeliness of access, diversify communication pathways, and enhance our resilience significantly. For our other ground systems and our on-orbit capabilities, we are strengthening our cyber defense, eliminating single points of failure, and hardening our architecture. This will also enable a much more resilient system going forward. The NRO has been at the forefront of innovation since our inception, and today that culture of innovation is even more critical. Our highly skilled workforce, including both military and civilians, brings diverse viewpoints and innovative ideas to solve complex intelligence problems. A critical example is growing our workforce to be able to take full advantage of both AI, ML, machine learning, and automation that's going to be required to operate and deliver capability to the users. Partnerships are inherent in who we are. Our workforce is a blend of government, civilian, and members of every military service, primarily the Space Force, but every military service. As we evolve to meet the changing mission needs, we look forward to continued collaboration on personnel support from both our civilian and military partners. We maximize our partnership when we have partners and colleagues across the intelligence and defense community to leverage every possible innovative to optimize collection, tools, and effectiveness. For example, our partnership with U.S. Space Force and previously the Air Force on launch procurement has provided assured access to space for the NRO systems for over 15 years. We're fully committed to NSSL Phase 3 and have worked very closely with the Space Force to include all the capabilities that we need to execute our mission. Our continued success depends on our ability to adopt and to innovate faster, not only fast, but faster than any of our potential competitors, and on Congress's continued support for our mission. New technology, new partnerships, and the talents of our workforce are critical to maintaining our competitive advantage in keeping America safe. On behalf of the entire NRO workforce, I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you here today. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Ms. Wilkerson, you're recognized.
Good afternoon, distinguished members of the subcommittee. The National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency is our nation's leading authority for geospatial intelligence, or GEOINT, providing warfighters, policymakers, intelligence professionals, and first responders with the decision advantage they need to carry out national security objectives at home and abroad, from seabed to space. The GEOINT we deliver, much of which comes from space-based systems, conveys not only what, when, and where events are happening, it also illustrates how they are occurring, the implications, and what is likely to transpire next. NGA's GEOINT professionals work across more than 100 locations in the United States and around the world. Dual-headed as an intelligence agency and combat support agency, NGA provides GEOINT to the services, combatant commands, and other federal departments and agencies. This includes tasking, analysis, and dissemination of national technical means and commercial imagery, data, and GEOINT analytic services in support of community requirements. NGA is committed to maximizing efficient and effective use of all available GEOINT sensors, including those that are space-based, enabling collection to be at the right location at the right time to meet service and combatant command needs. Obtaining the data used to produce GEOINT is not a simple task. NGA's highly skilled intelligence collection professionals execute a process we call informed collection orchestration to align national priorities with operational and analytical needs and real-world deadlines. NGA's unique ability to carry out informed collection orchestration is not only in statute policies they need when they need it. We continue to provide what is needed when it is needed by integrating with warfighting headquarters around the world to incorporate artificial intelligence through programs like MAVEN, accelerating their operations and decision speeds. As we move forward with AI, our goal is safe, responsible, and accurate application of its capabilities in a way that augments and enhances our GEOINT workforce. I would also like to highlight two areas where NGA is leading within the space domain. First, we maintain detailed physical characterizations of our planet from the ocean floor to space, providing critical data and production of materials necessary for the safe navigation of air, land, and sea. Second, NGA also leads the way in guaranteeing assured precision and accuracy of GPS, maintaining the World Geodetic System 1984, or WGS 84, reference frame, which is the backbone for all geolocation. This foundational mission complements the important work we do to deliver GEOINT that advances national security of space, because just as the United States recognizes the critical role of space, so too do our global competitors. Our most capable and potential adversaries continue to invest in increasingly threatening counter-space systems, intent on disrupting or denying critical space systems and services that not only support our national security, but also our everyday lives. NGA remains focused on understanding such capabilities and providing our warfighters and policymakers the information they require to counter and deter threats to our national and commercial assets. In closing, NGA relies greatly on data obtained from space systems to deliver vital GEOINT that advances national security priorities and the security of space. And we are committed to the partnerships with the United States Space Force, U.S. Space Command, and NRO to ensure that GEOINT plays the broadest role possible in understanding adversary space and counter-space threats. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. We'll now begin our members' questions. We'll each have 5 minutes. I have a question for each one of you, so I'll ask for a concise answer. Dr. Plumb, in your commercial space integration strategy, you talk about the possible need for commercial insurance, commercial war risk insurance, U.S. government-provided insurance, and indemnification to be provided for commercial space providers as part of doing business with the U.S. government. Can you talk a little bit more about what authorities you think you will need to fully realize this?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The commercial space integration strategy, this is one of the main pieces that was helping drive some of the writing of this strategy, because a lot of questions from industry on that, and we were trying to lay flat what the actual situation is. I will say for the air domain and for the maritime domain, there is a government-backed war risk insurance vehicle, which is, we know it as CRAF. You've heard of CRAF perhaps for the air domain. That's really just for air logistics. And then there's also the VISA for VISA, which is for the maritime. There is no similar statutory authority for the space domain. Now, the department is not ready to say that we need that right now, but the secretary has tasked his department to go look and say, hey, what would be those conditions where we might need it? And part of that, of course, is where would that need to be changed in statute. All of those cases, those types of insurance vehicles are only turned on when the department wants them. They're not a blanket agreement. It's only in specific situations the department agrees that in this specific case we should use them. So I think there's goodness there, and I think we would need Congress's help to do that if that was the direction we had to go.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Wilkerson, I wanted to give you a chance to give NGA's perspective when it comes to the future of tasking for GMTI that we talked about earlier. From your vantage point, what policy documents or directives do you believe support your position?
Thank you for the question. Sir, we really look forward to collaborate. Thank you for the question. Sir, we look forward to collaborating with our partners within Space Force as well as the NRO in a way that allows for the leveraging of the expertise and skills that are resident in each of our agencies. We also anticipate that we will be have a supporting role in the MTI working group.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Meink, one issue that we hear a lot about is how much we are taking advantage of the commercial market for space imagery. What steps is the NRO taking to increase the use of commercial imagery, remote sensing, to complement and integrate and augment with government systems?
I guess we'll break that into two pieces. Second piece is we're working closely with the NGA and the rest of the department to fully integrate commercial services into an integrated architecture so you can task them just as effectively as you can task any of the national systems. So working close, we've made great progress on that. With respect to incorporating new and additional commercial partners, that's been a big focus of ours. Obviously, we have a large number of contracts with electro-optical commercial providers. We also have contracts with radar providers, commercial radar providers, and we have a set investment every year that its sole purpose is to accelerate and work with up-and-coming commercial partners to advance their capability and help guide them on what the IC and DOT need so that as they make their investments, we can eventually form more robust partnerships and other than just the early development phases. So we're doing it across the board.
Very good, thank you. And finally, Dr. Calvelli, Mr. Calvelli, DoD's commercial space strategy notes the importance of achieving integration with commercial entities prior to conflict to include planning and training activities. How would you characterize Space Force's current level of integration with commercial entities?
I think today the best example of that would be launch. We're relying predominantly on the commercial launch infrastructure for launching our most stressful missions as well as ones that are less stressful, like our more proliferated kind of systems. We're also using commercial today in some cases for satellite communication systems. And I can envision a future where we're taking advantage more commercial to do things like more space domain awareness. And as it evolves and becomes more mature, sort of the space access, mobility and logistics, on-orbit servicing sort of things as well. So I think today, we practice even just the standpoint of like the Victus Nox demo where we actually had a commercial flight that actually got our satellite up to orbit within about 27 hours from call up. And I think as we continue to evolve and take more advantage of the commercial sector, you're absolutely right, we need to include that as part of our training regimen as well.
Very good, thank you so much. I'll now turn to the ranking member for any questions he might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up on this Title 10 versus Title 50 concern that the chairman and I both raised. Quick story, the Space Force and INDOPACOM recently worked with our industry partners to notify warfighters of a CCP space launch within 24 hours and then use commercial imaging capability to image that same satellite within days, all unclassified. This information was immediately useful to the commander of INDOPACOM, yet they faced opposition in even doing this exercise, and we hear consistently that the IC is opposed to DoD acquiring commercial imagery directly. Dr. Plumb, as we've heard, there's an outdated DoD guidance surrounding this issue that was written in the early 2000s. Do you believe that we should take a look at that policy and update it to reflect a new reality?
Yes.
Might you elaborate?
Look, I think, appreciate the question, and I just want to be clear. I truly do believe that despite what you're hearing, we all agree that we need to find a way to make sure that the warfighter gets the information they need in an operational relevant timeline. Without that, there's no point in the systems. Like, that's our mission. I do think what we found in the classification review is that these policies are very old. The classification policy was written before any of the commercial space had really evolved. What you're referring to here, I mean, there's an NSPD, a presidential document from 2003. There are other things, some classified, some not, but some of these are legacy, and legacy isn't as long anymore because the commercial innovation has accelerated what's happening in the space domain so quickly. So I think it would be incorrect to not go back and look and say, hey, are these things, have the memos and policies evolved with the real situation? I mean, there was a time when commercial imagery, just as an example, was the thing that people were like, this is so interesting. Well, now what the product is in the market is not just the imagery, it's also the analysis of it. And so that is a different place than we were 20 years ago. I think these need to be looked at.
Okay, all right. Dr. Plumb, as I said in my opening statement, I believe we've made profound progress in space over the course of your tenure. I'm rather disappointed that you weren't at the hearing yesterday to enjoy my esoteric jokes that as a physics major, a fellow physics major, I think you would have appreciated. It would have literally doubled the number of people laughing in the room. I'd understand why people don't find jokes about hypersonics and Chernobyl so enjoyable. But in any event, I was wondering if you could just take a minute to reflect on your tenure and think about what are some of your most proud achievements? What are some of the most significant areas where we've been able to make progress, or where you've been able to make progress?
First of all, thank you for that open-ended question. The 4 C's that we started with 3 C's from the day I got here, and then we ended up with 4 because commercial is so important that we had to add that really to my priority list. I think we've made a lot of progress on all of those, but fundamentally, the thing that I think has driven this is trying to be truly collaborative across the national security enterprise with the IC, with the services, with the White House, with the State Department, with the Congress as well, and also the bipartisan approach here. I think in the past, folks have used classification to keep people out of decisions, and that tends to backfire. So I feel like having that collaborative approach has brought folks along together, and we've been able to iron out things early and really make progress. A focus on China has helped us make progress as well, sir. Nothing like having something to really focus the mind to say we need to get ready. That's probably the biggest thing. Going forward, tremendous amount still to do for implementation, and I would just say, conflict's not inevitable. I've said this many times, but it's not inevitable. If we do our job right, it will not happen, right? Deterrence is the goal, but we do have to be ready.
Well, thank you again for your service. Mr. Calvelli, the 2018 NDAA gave authorities to the Commander of Space Systems Command to maintain a watch list of contractors with a history of poor performance on space contracts. I'm just curious, how useful has this been? Is it a tool that we could expand?
It's been useful. I think it can be more useful. I would love to see the tool expanded and given the authority to me as the service acquisition executive to be able to use the crawl across all the space acquisition enterprise that are underneath my control. Right now, today, it's only at SSC and under the control of the SSC commander.
Are there other authorities like that that would help you better maintain control over these contracts?
I think that's a key one to get, and I think starting with that would be ideal.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Plumb, I too want to join the chorus of those who thank you for your public service and certainly wish you well. I'm certain that we'll be seeing you in other capacities, and we all look forward to that. Dr. Plumb, on page 4 of your written testimony, it states, Russia is also developing a concerning anti-satellite capability related to a new satellite carrying a nuclear device that Russia is developing. This capacity could pose a threat to all satellites operated by countries and companies around the globe, as well as the vital communications, scientific, meteorological, agriculture, commercial, and national security services we all depend upon. Dr. Plumb, this is the first time that the administration has approved anyone in an open, unclassified session making that statement. Just yesterday, Secretary Austin was asked this question, and he deferred and requested that the conversation only occur in a classified setting. So this is significant that you have made this statement. I'm assuming the White House has approved your statement today.
Congressman, the statement, I would say the National Security Advisor has made similar comments in the last few days, and it's on the, I believe it's on the whitehouse.gov website, but he has made them, and we can get those to you as well.
But in a congressional,
This is the
open,
first congressional
unclassified
one.
statement, this is the first time that anyone has made
I think that's right, sir, and I do think that rightly falls to me, but yes, sir.
Well, thank you for making it, because you both characterized the issue and the threat as incredibly significant. I want to talk to you a little bit about the issue of developing. You say that they are developing a concerning anti-satellite capability. You first off acknowledge it's a satellite, so this is something that's going to be in orbit. Will this be in low Earth orbit, geo orbit? Where is this intended that it would be located?
Yeah, sir, a lot of this gets classified based on intel sources. So at the moment, I think that's as far as I can say, but right, the concept that we are concerned about is Russia developing, and if we are unable to convince them otherwise, to ultimately fly a nuclear weapon in space, which would be an indiscriminate weapon, doesn't have national boundaries, doesn't determine between military satellites, civilian satellites, or commercial satellites.
So, Dr. Plumb, you say developing. Is this conceptual, something that they put on a napkin somewhere? Is this they've developed a warhead, they've developed a satellite, they've married them together? When you say develop, what is the current risk or threat? Is this something that could be launched? Let's start with this. Is this something that could be launched now?
And here's where you have me, again, at a disadvantage. I'd be happy to have this conversation in a classified session. If we don't have one after today, as I know you're constrained for votes, I'd be happy to come back in my remaining tenure and have a one-on-one conversation with you, sir.
Is it an imminent threat?
It is not imminent in the way that we should have to worry about it right now, but we are concerned about it, the department and the entire administration, and I know this Congress is taking this deadly seriously, and we are, as you know, we just had that United Nations Security Council resolution that Russia vetoed, which may in fact tip their hand on this, that really just reaffirmed not placing nuclear weapons in outer space, which Russia and the United States and all spacefaring nations have already signed up not to do, so this is a concern for us.
Dr. Plumb, let's go to then what the effects would be.
Sure.
The Secretary testified that it would be devastating. You list scientific, meteorological, agricultural, commercial, national security. Tell us some of the things that would be the outcome if this anti-satellite that carries a nuclear payload was used in orbit.
Yes, sir. First of all, just be clear, modeling on this needs to be conducted. You have to know the specifics of how a thing would be used, what type of a detonation it might be, where it might be detonated changes the outcome as well. And some of this modeling probably could be more robust. But roughly, and low Earth orbit in particular, but roughly satellites that aren't hardened against a nuclear detonation in space, which is most satellites, could be damaged and affected, and some would be caught in an immediate blast, which they would not be able to survive the flux of that, and then others could be damaged over time by going through. There's a dip in the Van Allen belts over the South Atlantic, and if those Van Allen belts are pumped, then radiation damage to satellites would just naturally occur over time.
Dr. Plumb, my time is expiring.
I'm sorry, sir. Yeah,
could this render the area of the detonation unusable for a period of time?
So, several analysts do believe that detonation in space of the right magnitude in the right location could render low Earth orbit, for example, unusable for some period of time. And this was an example that we did in the 60s. The United
Chairman,
States
if you might,
did this.
can you give us some perspective? You said for a period of time.
I will just, well, again, I don't have those numbers in front of me. I would just say in the 60s, the United States detonated a nuclear weapon in space, unclassified, Starfish Prime, and that really rendered the orbits unusable for some
Could it be a year?
I believe it could, yes, sir.
Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Garamendi. Mr. Kurbahal.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Garamendi, for your generously yielding to me. I want to thank you, Dr. Plumb, for your many years of service to our country, and I wish you the best in whatever you pursue next. Certainly, I hope it's staying in touch with the federal government in some way or another. Innovation and competition from the commercial industry have lowered the cost of space launch for the U.S. government and private industry by a factor of 4, saving the DoD tens of billions. In my district at Vandenberg Space Force Base, I have seen how decreased cost for space access drives investment and innovation that greatly increases our nation's launch capacity. Vandenberg had only 4 launches in 2012, but may have as many as 50 this year alone, a significant development for the department and the U.S. industrial base. Mr. Calvelli, can you discuss how lower launch costs brought by commercial innovation and competition in the national security space launch program have changed our national security posture, including enabling the deployment of proliferated resilient constellations, a significant national security capability that was only feasible a decade ago from a launch cost or capacity perspective? That wasn't feasible.
I tell you, sir, the lower cost of launch has been a game changer for us all. It has dramatically improved our ability to build smaller satellites, to launch them quicker, to build proliferated constellations. It has really become sort of an amazing enabler for not only national security's launch, but also for what we're seeing is a proliferation of commercial space companies now. We're seeing companies being able to actually launch cost-effective satellites. So we're seeing universities building satellites and CubeSats. We're seeing a whole generation of young folks starting companies to go off and do servicing in space and to do space missions. People looking at building, commercial habitats in space. It's amazing, but all this is driven and enabled by the lower cost of launch.
Thank you. Proliferated LEO constellations have made services available that used to require very expensive, exquisite, oftentimes large satellites. Our domestic Earth observation industry can provide imagery faster and cheaper than ever before, which is why I am supportive of the Space Force Tactical Surveillance, Reconnaissance, and Tracking Program. This capability provides tremendous benefit to our combatant commands who have asked for this ability. Mr. Calvelli, can you walk me through how the recent demo conducted by the Space Force and INDOPACOM demonstrates how valuable this capability could be to the Department of Defense?
Yeah, so we're off doing a pilot program right now at a Space Systems Command, and it's going extremely well. And we're just very fortunate that the commercial industry has taken off in terms of commercial analytics that use space sensing as well as a variety of other sources to gather information and be able to do rudimentary things that we're able to provide to the commands in a timely manner. So we've invested some dollars in it last year. We've got some dollars heading in next year as well, and we continue on with the pilot and look forward to reporting back how that pilot goes.
Thank you. Some argue against the Space Force moving forward with this program at scale because there could be duplication with the IC on what is being bought from the industry, that the government could be paying for the same data twice. Mr. Calvelli, do you believe that concern could be overcome by the appropriate policies and structure guided by recent commercial space strategies?
It could be done in policy and structure, but I will tell you that I've asked my folks at the working level, and they say that they've enjoyed and they work cooperatively with the NRO and with the NGA to make sure there is no duplication going on. So across the working level, the teams are actually doing great and making sure we don't have any duplication. So I'm very proud of the intelligence community and the Department of Defense for working together on this.
Thank you. Mr. Plumb, China and Russia are investing in their space programs and making advancements. Do you think that fiscal year 25 budget request for our national security space program is adequate to maintain space superiority? And what happens if we fall behind in our space capabilities?
Well, I mean, sir, first of all, I do think it's adequate. I think, obviously, anyone in the department would always prefer to have additional money to put against additional problem sets. And the Fiscal Restraint Act, Responsibility Act, does put some budget pressure on us as we look at this. The one thing I'll say is when you look at the Space Force, if we're looking at what can you do in the next 2 years to get ready for a potential Taiwan problem set that really has some problems for the Space Force in particular as kind of a new service. It sort of eats seed corn if you can't also think about the 2030s, and that's a trade-off we wrestle with every budget, but I think the Space Force may be more impacted than others.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm out of time. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Desjardins.
Thank you. Mr. Calvelli, the Phase 3 acquisition strategy for the National Security Space Launch Program allows the Space Force to select up to 3 providers for its Lane 2 missions. As I'm sure you're aware, there's been some talk in the media about consolidation in the launch sector. If it ultimately comes to fruition, how would this consolidation impact your acquisition strategy for Phase 3?
So the Phase 3 Act strategy won't change. The Phase 3 Act strategy proposals are in-house, and we're working through them right now. So that's pretty much set in stone. I really like the Phase 3 strategy. If you think about our history, we were under a monopoly in terms of a single company for launch for decades. And the Air Force and now the Space Force, to their credit, have done a magnificent job of cultivating a second provider. And I think as a nation, one of the best things we possibly could do is cultivate a third provider as well to launch our most stressful missions. On top of that, the Lane 1 is the more commercial-like missions where we're allowing anybody to on-ramp onto that who brings a rocket and that has demonstrated a test a flight. And so I'm very optimistic with the strategy that we put together. I don't see that changing. Mergers and acquisition happens all the time in industry. We'll see what happens over time, and if any consolidation occurs, we'll have to adjust it then.
Okay. One concern is that we're trying to chart out this strategy for the next 10 years, and with China increasing its launch cadence every year, it's imperative that we get it right. Can you confidently project a 10-year strategy to deter China?
So it's really the launch strategy is really a 5-year strategy, right? Lane 2 is a 5-year strategy. Lane 1 is a 5-year strategy with 5 one-year options. And so we always have the opportunity to adjust the contract at any point in time.
Okay. I'm curious to know if you're planning on maintaining block buys in future procurements. Certainly this would help maintain healthy supply chains here in the U.S., but I'm interested in understanding how you all are assessing this idea.
Yeah, the team does a really great job in terms of looking out into the future and understanding and doing what they call their mission allocation process. And so we ended up doing block buys as part of Phase 2, and I don't see that changing as part of Lane 2 for Phase 3.
Okay. Well, staying on the issue of how we can best leverage the ever-evolving space industry, and Dr. Plumb, I would like to get you in here in addition to Secretary Calvelli. Again, I think the department is largely doing a great job leveraging innovation in the private industry to meet national security objectives in the space domain. However, a key hindrance to this effort has been the cumbersome FAA permitting process for launch and re-entry licenses. How are you working with the FAA and the industry to improve efficiency in the review and approval process?
Thanks, sir. I would say that the department does need the FAA to move, sometimes more quickly. I do think they have some funding challenges. I've recently been involved personally in some conversations with them. I think the department generally supports efforts to help the FAA be able to have enough resources to get this right.
Anything to add?
Just like we mentioned earlier about, it's always great to look at policies and directives and update them. I am sure that, the current regulations that were put in place didn't anticipate what an amazing space enterprise we were going to have and space economy for the country. And I think that both Congress and the executive branch need to work together to make sure that we have the most efficient and effective regulations and policies in place to continue to allow commercial industry to innovate and take advantage of launch and take advantage of space as opposed to being held back.
All right. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Norcross.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank all the witnesses for being here today, and certainly Dr. Plumb. We appreciate everything you've done, and more importantly, what you will continue to do. I want to drill down a little bit further on the conversation that Mr. Turner started, and the conversation we have when we start talking about the recent UN security resolution that was vetoed by Russia. But you mentioned an item and brings it up, the Outer Space Treaty, early 60s sometimes, or maybe it was the late 60s signed on to, that talks about weaponization in space. More specifically, I think it talked about mass destruction. Could you brief us quickly on that?
Yes, sir. It's pretty straightforward, actually, at least for satellites in orbit around the Earth. Basically says that countries agree not to place nuclear weapons or any other weapons of mass destruction in orbit around the Earth. And so the fact that Russia vetoed a resolution reaffirming a commitment they've already made and, is concerning.
The reason I bring that up is the term mass destruction, because when we look at what is going on outside of what was recently reported, have the Russian and Chinese have they already militarized and weaponized space?
So, if I may, I think you're asking, what you're asking is a slightly different question.
Exactly.
Because the Outer Space Treaty does not preclude military weapons in space. It precludes weapons of mass destruction in space, and it specifically calls out nuclear weapons just to eliminate any confusion. But if the question is, are Russia and China weaponizing space or militarizing space? Absolutely. Absolutely. They are developing and fielding and deploying a number of counter-space weapons. Some are ground-based, but some are on orbit. And I think that personally think that that is what makes their kind of continuing championing at the UN, their PPWT, which is about not placing weapons on orbit, to be so hypocritical and frankly unbelievable. You know, at the unclassified level, we can say that Russia's deploying and developing prototype kinetic weapons in space. We can say that China has developed robotic satellites that are really probably dual use. They could be used for non-military purposes, but they can clearly also be used for military purposes like grappling a satellite. And in classified sessions to go deeper. But I do think that their proposal at the UN just continues to be both unbelievable, unverifiable, and really hypocritical based on what they're actually doing.
Exactly the point we're trying to make. There are weapons in space, mass destruction, crossing over that threshold, particularly with the nuclear side of that equation. When we look forward to what is coming in space, and quite frankly, potentially could happen, our nuclear command and control, and it's going to be delicate in this environment, in the event that space were to be blocked, mass destruction somewhere else, what would cause us in concerns for nuclear command and control? Space got wiped out. We still have a way of addressing those issues.
So I'll just say any good military plan requires both your primary, your alternate, your contingency, and your emergency plan for communications. We do rely heavily on space for all our military missions, but we do need to have plans for contingency.
Right. But as we look forward, and this is where I'm going with this line of questioning, in addition to the command and control, putting that aside, could be addressed, our eyes would be put out.
Yes, sir.
And that is a major concern because then we won't necessarily know until some other form would let us know that there was an attack.
Yeah, I think this is where this line of conversation is the type of conversation that needs to be held with potential adversaries, right, with Russia, with China. Right, this is why we have routinely said that attacks on a nuclear command and control system, including our overhead eyes, that overhead persistent infrared, is a prelude to attack. This is a concern, right? If you're doing this, why are you doing this outside of being ready to attack us and blind us? And so there should be off-limits things to prevent escalation, in the worst case, to a nuclear war.
Exactly my point. Thank you, and I yield back.
Mr. Strong.
Thank you, Chairman Lamborn, Ranking Member Moulton. Mr. Calvelli, thank you for being here today. You may have heard a few weeks ago I co-led a bipartisan letter in support of the National Security Space Launch Program with Ranking Member Moulton, which is supported by several members of the House Defense Committee. I'd like to commend the department for its steps taken to encourage competition within Phase 3 of the NSSL program, specifically the dual-lane approach, which provides separate launch opportunities for new entrants and experienced national security launch providers. However, I do have concerns about Lane 1. What guardrails does Phase 3 have to keep any providers, particularly our experienced providers with high launch cadences, from underbidding Lane 1 launches intended for the new entrants trying to cut their teeth?
You know, it's all going to depend on what the payload is and the mission. And I mean, the key to entry into Lane 1 is the ability to actually have launched the rocket. I think I understand your point, and I'd like to take that back to think more through about that.
Thank you. To be clear, there's nothing official within the Phase 3 strategy to ensure that smaller new providers are benefiting from Lane 1 as intended. Is that a fair assessment?
I think it all depends on the size of the payload. If you're launching, just a couple of small sats, it's going to be more cost effective to go on a small provider than it is going to be on more of a traditional rocket. It's going to cost you a lot less.
Right. I understand the point you're trying to make, but if the department is truly committed to the dual lane approach and encouraging new providers to work with the Space Force, I would personally like to see something a bit more concrete to protect this. Mr. Calvelli, how confident are you that the Space Force's plan for missile warning and tracking capabilities meets requirements to provide full operational capability within the necessary time frame?
Well, I'm very confident. We've got a great architecture already on orbit today with the space-based infrared system, so we're flying vehicles with that today. Those are operational on orbit and doing great things. We have their replacements coming through what's called the Next Gen Geo program that is continuing to make progress, and we'll see a launch of that in 25-26 timeframe. We have some challenges making sure that the mission payload gets delivered. It's about a year late, and we're tracking that really closely. It should arrive this summer for integration into the satellite and for a launch at the end of 25, early 26. On top of that, we also have pivoted a couple years back to start developing a proliferated LEO constellation and a proliferated MEO constellation, that medium Earth orbit. Both those constellations added new capability. The ones on orbit say only do missile warning. These systems at MEO and LEO will do missile tracking. So they'll warn you and they'll track the missile, which would be ideal for advanced weapon systems like hypersonics.
That's exactly why I asked that question. I know you submitted a statement. You highlighted a concern with the delivery of the timeline for the next generation GEO, and I appreciate that answer. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, and I see there are 5 minutes left on the clock over on the voting on the chamber, but I'm going to let Mr. Garamendi ask any questions he wants to.
Mr. Norcross and I developed an additional question. Was the 1960 nuclear explosion by the United States information classified?
No, you can look it up online, sir.
What did we learn from that?
Well, obviously it was a different time, and of course we were doing nuclear tests to learn things, but I think what we learned, if I have my history right, is that it did significant damage to all the satellites that were in those orbits, and some failed soon, but some failed over time and was attributed to that explosion.
Thank you. I'm going to just pose the question, then come back to you in writing because we are out of time here. And this is for Dr. Plumb and Mr. Calvelli. The commander of U.S. Space Command cited space domain awareness as the command's top priority among the escalating threats from China and Russia, part of what was discussed just a moment ago. Do we have the ability to be aware? And if not, what do we need to do to be aware of the space? If you can come back to us in writing, other than that, our careers will be terminated if we miss a vote, so we best be on our way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. I want to thank all the witnesses for testifying. I thank the members for participating. I thank the audience for their interest, and we are now adjourned.
270 meters and closing. Crew Dragon expected to converge with waypoint 1 directly in front of the International Space Station in less than 5 minutes. You can see the views right over the shoulders of Commander Shane Kimbrough and pilot Megan MacArthur. Kimbrough on the left, MacArthur on the right from that view.
From this view from the International Space Station, you can see what we were mentioning earlier, where Dragon was below the station. You could see that previously when it had Earth in the background. Now it is almost adjacent, or almost in the same orbit as the International Space Station, as it's making its way to the docking axis at waypoint 1. Now this maneuver from below the station to in front of the docking port is almost complete, just a few minutes away.
Getting great views from all around, from the station side, from the Dragon side. The outline of the station you see on the displays inside Crew Dragon is in line with the position of where Dragon is relative to the International Space Station. It's almost at the docking axis, about 2.5 minutes to go until it converges with waypoint 1.
And as a reminder, Dragon is flying autonomously, so they aren't using those display panels to fly Dragon. They're just using them to monitor each step of the way. So the crew is basically just patiently waiting until they dock with the station.
Now seeing Dragon in a better view, a lot more clear now that it's only 240 meters away. You can see the nose cone clearly deployed, extended towards the space-facing side or zenith side.
A really good zoomed-in view, and you could almost make out those 4 bulkhead thrusters on the forward portion of the Dragon capsule.
There you go. The Cronus is adjusting the aperture of the station cameras.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Approach 1 and soft capturing extension will begin shortly. Dragon will continue to waypoint 2, with the additional lighting assessment occurring at 110 meters, as previously noted. For awareness, if sunlight results in the loss of the Dragonite geofilters, Dragon will autonomously retreat back to waypoint 1, remaining on closed loop control using the time of flight filters. I'll copy.
We are in a handover period, so we may have missed a call as we were switching from Tedra's satellites. We're looking at about 20 seconds to go until we converge with waypoint 1. There's going to be an approach burn maneuver using the Draco thrusters. That's called approach 1, and that'll move Dragon from right in front of the docking axis, 220 meters away, and start moving in, closing in to waypoint 2, just 20 meters away from the docking axis. Of course, they'll be monitoring along the way.
We did hear the Corps mention that they are going to have a checkpoint to make sure that there isn't too much sunlight on the space station, which will prevent Dragon from docking. If that does happen, Dragon will autonomously back out and wait until the sunlight has cleared to ensure a good docking with the space station. Because this is all autonomous, it uses some visual cameras to align with the docking port. So it's really important that we don't have that sunlight getting in the way.
Section over on the big loop, sound check.
SpaceX has you loud and clear on the big loop. Helm me.
Loud and clear. Your last call, we copied most of it, but you cut out towards the end there. I'm not sure if there's anything important for us.
Copy. I'm going to repeat the end of the call. We did have a TDRS handover. Just for awareness, following the lighting assessment, if we continue but sunlight results in a loss of the Dragon Eye geo filters, Dragon Eye will autonomously retreat back to waypoint 1, still on closed loop control using the time of flight filters. How copy?
Okay, we copied all. Thank you very much for repeating.
No problem, Shane. And for awareness, the C2V2 link reconfiguration has been completed.
Copy, C2V2 complete.
There, the Corps just reiterated that they will be checking to make sure that the sunlight is not in the way of the visual systems between Dragon and the space station. If that does happen, Dragon will autonomously retract and wait until we do get some good visual views for these systems to dock with each other. So
that's right. Crew Dragon resilience actually coming into view a little bit clearer now from the cameras aboard Dragon. Dock to the Zenith port.
Yeah, that was on the upper portion of the screen.
That's right. Now again, to reiterate, Dragon has passed waypoint 1, 220 meters in front of the station, executed a burn maneuver to go ahead and move in. So we're in approach 1, and it's heading towards waypoint 2. Now inside the keep out sphere. It's currently in the process of extending its soft capture ring that'll be used to dock to the international docking adapter of the forward port. We're monitoring the visual systems of Dragon. It would execute an automatic retreat if the sun was interfering with the optical systems as it makes its way towards an approach. We're at about 150 meters away from the station.
And we have such a great camera view here. You can really see the detail on Dragon. Again, those 4 bulkhead thrusters. You could almost read the logo, the Dragon logo on the side of the vehicle.
That's right. We'll get even better views as it makes its way even closer to make contact and capture with the space station.
There it is.
Yeah, based on the trajectory here, we may even anticipate a capture a little bit earlier than anticipating. We were looking at about 2:10 a.m. Pacific time. It might be at maybe closer to 2:07 p.m. The features of the space station coming into view very clearly.
Yeah, you can see a lot of the detail there, and as you mentioned, the Crew 1 Dragon.
Space station on the big loop. Procedure review complete, ready for docking.
Houston copies.
All right, that was confirmation from Victor Glover aboard the International Space Station. From the space station side, he is go for docking. The soft capture ring itself is fully extended. We're 115 meters in closing.
Looking at your screen, the port that we are going to be docking with is directly in the middle of the screen, that circular area on the International Space Station.
Station Houston on 2 for Ike regarding SSC 17 and D2DM. We are seeing some strange configurations on the video, and we would like to close and restart that. We can take care of that from the ground if you would like. Absolutely. If you're seeing nominal, that works for us.
Okay, so Victor Glover aboard the station still has...
And Dragon SpaceX soft capture ring extension is complete. Additionally, we did beat the sunlight for the Dragon Eye filters, so we are not going to command a hold.
Copy, go.
All right, so that's great news. We passed the 110-meter checkpoint that the ground operators were referencing, making sure the sun wasn't interfering with the optical sensors, the Dragon Eye, that are part of the guidance and navigation and control system aboard Dragon. We passed that check mark. We're good to go. We beat the sun there. So we're now inside 80 meters and closing. Dragon will pause at 20 meters. That's designated as waypoint 2 to conduct a go, no-go poll for the readiness on both the Dragon side and the International Space Station side, making sure everyone is good for docking. If we are go, we expect to dock during this pass over an orbital daytime. Expected in less than 20 minutes. Some of the features there, you can see a lot of the visiting vehicles on board station. At the bottom is a Russian Soyuz vehicle that delivered crew to the International Space Station. Just in front of that, or actually above that, is the Crew Dragon Resilience docked to the Zenith port. Once Crew Dragon Endeavour arrives, there will be 2 Crew Dragons attached to the space station.
And this view from Crew Dragon looking at the International Space Station, it looks like it's this very slow and steady movement, but in reality, they're moving at 17,500 miles per hour.
The rendezvous operations are absolutely incredible. You can sort of see the Northrop Grumman Cygnus cargo craft as well, some of the ultraflex solar arrays coming into view a little bit clearly.
And you could see that Crew 1 Dragon vehicle on the top of your screen. Once Crew 2 docks to the International Space Station, we will have 2 Crew Dragons docked at the same time for the first time.
That view right there was truly a representation truly of an international cooperation there. The U.S.-built Node 2 is where the Dragon will be docking today. It was flanked by the European Columbus module and the Japanese GEM.
On the big loop, visors down.
SpaceX copies. The visors are down. We may enter into a hold at waypoint 2. We are still awaiting ground go for final approach.
Never copies.
The detail of this camera view is pretty incredible. Here from the International Space Station, watching Crew Dragon as it is slowly approaching.
And as expected, Dragon holding at waypoint 2. It's at about 20 meters right in front of the docking axis.
And if you're just now joining us, we are just waiting for a confirmation for go for docking. Currently holding Dragon at waypoint 2. And again, it looks like Dragon is just paused and not even moving, but again, as we just mentioned, both the space station and Crew Dragon are actually moving at approximately 17,500 miles per hour. So it's pretty incredible how it can hold these speeds so that it looks like they are just completely paused.
That's right. Teams on the ground, both from the station side in Mission Control Houston and Mission Control Hawthorne, just checking and verifying all systems are go to proceed with docking.
And when we do begin docking, there will be 2 portions of this. There will be a soft capture followed by a hard capture. The soft capture will be a soft capture ring that basically just connects the Crew Dragon to the space station to enable the hard capture, which will be 12 hooks that will attach Dragon to the station.
Again, we're standing by the International Space Station, flying over the Indian Ocean now, just south of the Indian border. It's heading on a southeasterly course just south of Australia and should cross over the Terminator line into the Pacific Ocean into an orbital nighttime. The expectation is for Dragon to depart here from waypoint 2 and proceed on with docking ahead of orbital nighttime to beat the sun.
can see this camera moving around. Again, this is controlled from the ground from Mission Control Houston. And they're maneuvering this camera around so we can just get a more detailed view of the Crew 2 Dragon Endeavour patiently waiting, docking to the International Space Station.
Dragon on its second flight, about to dock to the forward end of the International Space Station for the second time.
And Station and Endeavour on the big loop. Ike, we are not able to recover that video for the D2DM, so you can close that window, and we should be ready to press into final approach shortly.
Station copies.
You did hear that call out speak out to Ike. Ike is actually referring to Victor Glover. That is just his nickname.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Ground is now go for final approach. Upon confirmation of crew readiness for final approach, we will enable the approach. Please confirm crew readiness, and a reminder, once Dragon is inside the crew hands-off point, retreat and breakout are no longer permitted.
Crew is ready for final approach.
And got some good words that the crew is ready for the docking to the International Space Station. They no longer will have control of any aborts. If there is an abort needed, it will have to be done by the Dragon autonomously.
And on the big loop, monitor per steps 3 and 4 and 1.104.
Station copy.
Again, we are now moving into the CHOP, which is the crew hands-off point. As I was mentioning earlier, if there is an abort, it will need to be done autonomously by Dragon.
All right, and we did get confirmation. Approach 2 has been initiated. So Dragon now making its way inside the 20-meter hold point at about 18 meters and closing. Final approach of Endeavour to dock with the International Space Station has started. Docking expected in about 3.5 minutes from now.
You could see on your screen as Crew Dragon slowly approaches towards that port for docking.
Sorry, we're 13 meters and closing, making a slow and methodical approach to the docking port. That's on the forward end of the International Space Station, that international docking adapter where Crew Dragon Endeavour has docked once before.
Meters.
Copy, 10 meters.
Let that call out was Crew Dragon is just 10 meters away from the International Space Station as it continues its approach for docking. Again, docking will occur in 2 phases. There will be a soft capture followed by a hard capture, and what that hard capture means is 12 physical hooks will connect the Dragon to the space station.
Great views. Dragon just 6 meters away as the station and Dragon fly in tandem 263 statute miles over the South Indian Ocean in the background.
5 meters.
We're 5 meters and closing.
Copy 5 meters.
Really start to see the detail on Dragon there as it is closing in on docking.
That's right, 2.5 meters, 30 seconds. Crew hands off point was called out.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, soft capture confirmed.
Copy, soft capture confirmed.
Great news with that call out. That soft capture is confirmed.
That's right, that soft capture time, 2:08 a.m. Pacific time, 4:08 a.m. Eastern. The station and Dragon connected 264 statute miles over the South Indian Ocean. Endeavour connected to International Space Station for the 2nd time.
And there are still a few steps to complete before Dragon is securely attached.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, soft capture ring retraction in progress.
That's good. The ring retraction is happening. Ring retraction happening as expected. And after the ring retracts, 12 hooks will latch, 6 at a time, to perform a hard capture, and will officially mate Dragon to the International Space Station.
Got this really awesome view of Dragon as it is connected to the port, currently making progress on hard capture.
Soft capture ring retraction does take some time. It is continuing at its anticipated speed. Things are looking good. Again, this is the first in a series of steps to officially mate Dragon to the station. If you're just joining us, we heard the call out for soft capture confirmed at 2:08 a.m. Pacific time, 4:08 a.m. Eastern time. Station and Dragon were 264 statute miles over the South Indian Ocean at the time of contact and capture. We're still in the process of retracting the soft capture ring and anticipating proceeding with the hard capture sequence, where 12 hooks will drive to officially mate Dragon with the International Space Station's International Docking Adapter at the forward port. Crew Dragon Endeavour docked to that forward port for the second time.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Ring retraction is complete. Docking sequence is holding for MCS reconfiguration.
Endeavour copies all.
If you're just now joining us, as you can see on your screen, Crew Dragon has made contact with the International Space Station. And we're currently in progress of...
Endeavour and Station, MCS is configured, proceeding with hook driving.
Endeavour copies. Station copies.
Great timing there. This is now the beginning of the hard capture sequence. This is where 12 hooks will latch between Dragon and the space station, 6 hooks at a time. This will take a few minutes to complete.
That's right, that MCS is just configuring the International Space Station's attitude control. It needed to be configured differently between a soft capture and hard capture sequence. So now that that's been confirmed, they can go ahead and press to drive the 12 hooks needed to confirm a hard capture. To reiterate, the Dragon had contact and capture with the space station at 2:08 a.m. Pacific time, 5:08 a.m. Eastern. Space Station and Dragon crossing over the Terminator line just south of Australia, about to head over the South Pacific Ocean. Start seeing the views of Dragon get a little bit dimmer as we still undergo the hard capture sequence. All right, again, we're still undergoing the hard capture sequence. There's 12 hooks that drive to officially mate Dragon to the International Space Station, 6 of them driving currently. Station attitude configured to support the hard capture sequence. Now operating on control moment gyros to maintain attitude control during the hard capture sequence. All right, and we have confirmation the first set of hooks, all 6 have been driven. They look good. Second set are driving and are looking good at the anticipated speed. Halfway there.
This will take just a couple more minutes for hard capture to complete. As a reminder, after hard capture is complete, they do still have some more steps that they need to go through in order to ensure that the space station and Dragon are safe for crew ingress. There will be the hatch opening as the crew on board Dragon as well as the station will be walking through some procedures prior to ingress of the crew on the International Space Station. But once they do ingress on the station, there will be a welcome ceremony.
Again, half of the hard capture hooks have been driven and locked into place. The second set of 6 hooks, 12 total, 6 of them driving.
Dragon SpaceX on the Big Loop, hard capture is complete. You are go to open visors.
Copy, hard capture complete. Opening visors.
All right. Crew Dragon Endeavour officially made it to the International Space Station. That dynamic period of the docking phase is complete. The crew inside Dragon have been wearing their suits just as an extra precaution, but they can go ahead and pull up their visors. It's going to be some time until the hatches themselves are open between Dragon and the International Space Station. Still some things to configure on that side. The vestibule on the International Docking Adapter that separates the hatches of Dragon and the International Space Station, that's been exposed to the vacuum of space and has had the sun shining on it periodically. So when repressurizing the vestibule to equal the pressure inside the space station.
Station, hard capture complete. Welcome to ISS. We are so excited to have you aboard.
Thanks, Anna. We're glad to be here. We'll see you all in a few minutes.
International Space Station Commander Shannon Walker welcoming the crew. Now Crew 2 officially made it to the International Space Station. Again, it's going to be some time until they come in, but the commander of the International Space Station welcoming 4 new crew members for her expedition on board here shortly. All right, so again, there's a series of steps here as we enter into an orbital nighttime, completing the docking of Crew Dragon Endeavour to the International Space Station for a second time. That contact and capture occurring at 2:08 a.m. Pacific time, 5:08 a.m. Eastern. We have a confirmed hard capture. The umbilical is in motion to connect the station to the Dragon and provide data and power and communication through that umbilical, so it no longer has to rely on its own systems. Everything's looking good for that vehicle. It's going to be some time again until we repressurize the vestibule and get those hatches open between the Dragon and the International Space Station. It'll be the crew inside the station getting that ready to be opened.
Endeavour SpaceX docking sequence is complete. Welcome to the ISS.
Thank you, SpaceX. Great to be here.
in some more official words, that docking is complete. The crew must be so excited to finally have arrived at the space station. Again, there is some more steps that they will need to complete and some checks before they can ingress on the space station. But the crew can now get out of their suits before moving into hatch operations. So now they can start to get comfortable again. They no longer need these suits now that they have arrived at the space station.
That's right. And so it'll be some time again until that area between the International Space Station and or the hatches.
SpaceX Endeavour on Dragon to ground. Are you ready for us to begin suit doffing?
SpaceX copies. You are go to begin suit doffing and audio configuration. Procedure 4.012.
Copy, that's in work.
So again, it'll take some time. The crew will begin doffing or taking off their suits. It'll be some time to repressurize the vestibule. Station side, astronauts on the station side will configure the hatch, getting ready to open that up and welcome the crew inside the International Space Station. It was a pretty great docking. Everything happened right on cue and as expected. So it was a great to see Crew Dragon Endeavour dock to the International Space Station once again. We've enjoyed it from here in Mission Control Hawthorne, but to see how things turned out from the space station side of things as we work together to complete today's operation, let's go to Courtney Beasley for a refresher on what's ahead now that Dragon is docked.
SpaceX cameras are external.
Copy, thanks.
Thanks, Gary. It's great to see Dragon successfully docked to the International Space Station. Even through the face masks, you can see and feel the excitement in the room here in Mission Control Houston. Now that we're docked, Victor Glover is securing some hardware, and then he'll move right into hatch operations. First, he will open the large hatch at Node 2 forward, giving him access inside the pressurized mating adapter. Then he will have to pressurize the vestibule, which is the small space between the hatches on Dragon and the space station. This was exposed to vacuum prior to docking, and he will need to fill it with air and make sure its pressure is nearly equal with the atmospheric pressures on Dragon and the station. He will use a small valve on the station's hatch to slowly introduce air into the vestibule, and flight controllers here in Houston will monitor the pressure and temperature readings inside and verify that everything is leak-free before we get ready to open up the hatches. We expect it to take about 2 hours to get everything pressurized and checked out before we open hatches. With Dragon successfully docked to the International Space Station, that's the latest from here in Mission Control Houston. And back to the team over in Hawthorne.
All right, thanks, Courtney. As mentioned, it will take some time to go ahead and go through those procedures, but we'll stay with you throughout today's coverage. Of course, one of the major things will be repressurizing the vestibule in between the hatches. There's a hatch called the A-Pass hatch. That's the hatch on the International Space Station side. And then there's the Dragon hatch itself. In between is a vestibule that's currently at vacuum. So in order to travel through both hatches, you need to repressurize that. Now that there's a hard mate between the two vehicles, they'll check the seal. They'll do some leak checks as they're repressurizing the vestibule up to vacuum. And that will take some time.
SpaceX Endeavour, check on the cabin mic.
SpaceX has you loud and clear on the cabin mic.
We have you the same, thanks.
You're hearing the crew inside Endeavour go through their procedures. One of the first things they're ready to do is take off those suits. They had to wear it through several of the operations of a launch from the Kennedy Space Center to a docking with the International Space Station. Launch is a very dynamic activity, so they had suits on up until orbital insertion, and then they were able to doff their suits, have a meal, go to bed, check out some of the systems, wake up, and then right before they entered into the approach phase of today's flight with the approach initiation burn, they got their suits on and were able to pressurize them, and they held pressure throughout that sequence of today's flight until docking. Now they get to take it off. They get to stretch out, change into something a little bit more comfortable, but not too comfortable, of course, because they will be. We will have an event to welcome them on board the International Space Station we expect all 11 crew members to be there to welcome them. It's going to be pretty crowded, but it should be very exciting to see that many people on board the International Space Station.
And those call-outs that we just heard were they were doing a comm check with the Crew Dragon communications because they've now taken off their suits. They have comms through their suits, but since they're not going to be wearing their suits anymore, they need to use the comms through Dragon. So very exciting. It sounds like they're getting out of their suits as we speak, or doffing their suits. And then we will soon begin the process to open up those hatches so that the crew can finally ingress onto the space station. So it will take a little bit of time, but we will be here with you through every step of the way. If you're just now joining us, the Crew 2 crew has finally docked to the International Space Station after an approximately 23-hour ride from Earth to the station. Again, they are going to be performing a few procedures here before the Crew 2 can ingress onto the space station. They will be opening the APAS hatch, which is the space station side hatch, followed by the Dragon hatch. But this will take some time. They will need to repressurize the vestibule in between those two hatches before the crew can ingress.
That's right, the umbilical on the Dragon side has been fully extended to provide power, communications, and data from the International Space Station to the Dragon, so the Dragon no longer needing to rely on its own power systems. And of course, when the hatches are open, they'll be able to mix the air from the environment that's inside the space station with the Dragon, so it no longer needs to rely on its environmental control and life support systems. In the meantime, it is still doing so because the hatches are closed between both the Dragon and the International Space Station. There is a gap called the vestibule in between them that's currently at vacuum. That vestibule has been exposed to the vacuum of space on the forward end of the International Docking Adapter. So when bringing the pressure back up, there may be swings. Because of the temperature variation, there may be swings that need to dampen out before an effective leak check could take place. So the process of repressurizing the vestibule in between those two hatches does take quite a long time. It's expected to be about 2 hours until both of the hatches are open because of the length of time of repressuring that vestibule. Now from the station side, Victor Glover will outfit the 8-pass hatch. That's the one on the station side. He'll open it up and remove, once the vestibule is pressurized, he'll open that up and remove the docking target and install some padding onto the 8-pass hatch so that there's no unnecessary contact as astronauts are coming through the hatch from Crew Dragon to come inside of the forward end of the International Space Station.
Station Houston on 2 on the big loop. You are go to pick up in ingress part 1, step 1. Note that the pre-ingress ventilation in step 1.6 is not required.
Okay, picking up step 1 and 1.6 not required.
Dragon SpaceX, no response required, but ISS power connection has been established.
There you go. So Victor Glover on the International Space Station side already going through his procedures to get the hatches configured for ingress, essentially supporting the opening of the hatches, repressurizing in the vestibule. There's a lot to happen before we can open up the hatch and welcome the crew on the inside. The umbilical has been fully extended, and we just got confirmation that Dragon is drawing power from the International Space Station, so the solar arrays on the station providing power downstream to the Dragon. Dragon no longer needing to rely on its power. That officially confirmed. It will again take some time until the Dragon hatches are open. Dragon and Space Station hatches are open. And we've noticed for the past 2 times that Crew Dragons have docked to the station. The past 2 times being when Crew was aboard for Demo 2 and for Crew 1. We did notice that the crew inside Dragon took some time to get themselves situated, make sure everything on the Dragon side was configured before they left it and entered into the International Space Station. We should see celebratory hugs from the crew on board as they make their way one at a time, as they'll be together for the next few days until they have to say farewell to the Crew 1 astronauts aboard the International Space Station. Shannon Walker handing over command of the International Space Station. Before she does that, she's going to hand command over to Aki Hoshide, who's currently on board Crew 2. He'll take the responsibility of International Space Station commander through the duration of Expedition 65 until he's ready to hand it off to the next crew. That all happening in the next couple of days.
Crew Dragon Endeavour is docked to the International Space Station as we speak. The crew on board the space station as well as Crew 2 are preparing for a couple procedures here for hatch opening. That is the hatch opening on the space station side as well as the Crew Dragon hatch. And this will take approximately an hour, a little over an hour and a half to walk through all of these procedures. So though Crew 2 is at
station on the big loop, no 2 forward hatches open.
And Ike, we copy, and you are go to continue through step 2, pressurizing vestibule.
Continue through step 2.
As I mentioned, they are walking through several procedures to get those 2 hatches open. As you can hear, that communication between Victor Glover on board the station with the ground team helping him out with the procedures.
That first hatch that he mentioned is the Node 2 forward hatch. From inside the Node 2 segment of the International Space Station, there are 3 hatches to get from Node 2 all the way down to the Dragon itself.
Dragon SpaceX, if desired, reference procedure 4.400 for monitoring vestibule pressurization.
Copy 4.400 for vestibule depress.
So now that Node 2 forward hatch is open, Victor Glover inside the pressurized mating adapter. Down the PMA is the A-pass hatch, the hatch that separates the International Space Station now from the Dragon. With the Node 2 forward hatch open, Victor Glover can work to manually pressurize the vestibule. And we just heard from here in Mission Control Hawthorne that the crew on board Dragon Endeavour will be able to monitor the vestibule pressurization on their displays from the side of the Crew Dragon. You're getting a live look at both of the flight control rooms.
On the big loop. AFAS equalization valve closed at 0938.
Houston copies 0938.
So you're looking at both of the flight control rooms on the left. SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Flight controllers there successfully monitoring the navigation of Crew Dragon Endeavour that autonomously made its way from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida to the International Space Station, docking at 2:08 a.m. Pacific time, 5:08 a.m. Eastern. With the International Space Station as they've been flying over the South Indian Ocean. The control teams are now working to configure Dragon for its stay aboard the International Space Station. They've hard mated it using 12 hooks that drive to connect it to the International Docking Adapter, and have connected an umbilical and confirmed that power is being drawn from the space station to the Dragon, Dragon no longer needing to rely on its power source during its stay. All right, if you're just joining us, you're getting a live view of both of the control rooms. On the left is SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne, and on the right, Mission Control Houston with the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Crew Dragon Endeavour is officially docked to the International Space Station, and right now teams on both the station side and Dragon side are working to get ready to open up the hatches in between them. It's going to take some time until we get to that point where we're able to open up the hatches. Victor Glover on the station side is currently inside the pressurized mating adapter. He's working to manually pressurize the vestibule that exists between both of the hatches. It's going to take some time because that vestibule has been exposed to vacuum since before Crew Dragon just docked at 2:08 a.m. Pacific time, 5:08 a.m. Eastern time, and because it has been exposed to vacuum, the thermal environment causes it to have a little bit of oscillation as the pressure is rising. So they need to have some thermal equalization in the vestibule before beginning the pressurization to ensure that the leak checks are accurate. So they'll do a leak check on the way up to pressure, which is a little more than 14 pounds per square inch. They'll do a pressure check at 5 pounds per square inch, make sure everything's good, that the vestibule is holding pressure, and then they'll continue on up to match the pressure between the International Space Station and the Crew Dragon. In the meantime, Victor Glover will open up the A-Pass hatch on the International Space Station side. That's the hatch that separates the vestibule from the Dragon hatch. He'll outfit the A-Pass hatch by taking off the docking target, which is a long rod with an X on it, and was used for some of the optical navigation equipment on the Crew Dragon for Dragon's approach and eventual docking to the station. He'll remove that, he'll put some pads on the A-Pass hatch, make sure no one bumps their head on the way in, and then when he heads into the vestibule, there is a little window. Hopefully he'll be able to wave to his crewmates before they actually open up the hatch of the Dragon itself. After both hatches are open, the crews on both sides will get positioned. Well, first the Crew 2 astronauts will just make sure everything is okay on the Endeavour side before they go ahead and officially leave that vehicle. Crew from inside Endeavour will enter or ingress into the International Space Station one at a time, being greeted by the 7 crew members that are currently aboard the International Space Station, including Crew 1 astronauts. You have Mike Hopkins, Victor Glover, and Shannon Walker from NASA, and Soichi Noguchi from the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. Also on board, arriving on a Russian Soyuz in April, earlier this month, was Mark Vandehei of NASA, and Oleg Novitsky and Pyotr Dubrov from Roscosmos.
Dragon SpaceX for audio configuration.
Go ahead for audio config.
Shane, we are about to transition to hardline audio with ISS.
Copy.
All right, so you just heard the confirmation. The Dragon and International Space Station are mated now by not only the International Docking Adapter, but there is an umbilical that's extending to the space station. We did have confirmation that we have power that's being drawn from the space station to the Dragon side, so they're configuring some of the other channels, including communication. So they'll configure that one at a time. Some of the sequence of events that's going to happen over the next couple of hours until as we continue to repressurize the vestibule and get the station and Dragon outfitted to eventually open up the hatches. We'll be with you throughout the entire duration of this sequence until we have those hatches open and provide a live coverage of a welcome ceremony, show the inside of the space station and the crews of Dragon, both Resilience and Endeavour, and of course the MS-18 Soyuz vehicle that are all on board the International Space Station now as part of Expedition 65, welcoming each other officially aboard.
and Endeavor Houston on 2 on the big loop for hardline. We are ready for comm checks with SpaceX, ISS, and Houston.
All right, so it's a little hard to see from this view. It's a external camera view aboard the International Space Station. On the port truss, you can sort of see the nose cone flipped up, but that's Crew Dragon Endeavor on the forward end of the station. It's hard mated using 12 hooks that have driven to hard capture Crew Dragon Endeavor to the International Space Station. It's also connected by umbilical to the station. We've confirmed that power is being drawn from the station to Dragon. Dragon no longer needing to rely on its own internal systems for power. That umbilical also provides a communication line. Now coming up will be a test of that communication line between the teams, between the Dragon itself, Crew Dragon Endeavor, and the International Space Station, and the ground teams, making sure that that connection that we've been hearing throughout the approach and docking phase of today's flight on the big loop.
SpaceX Houston in station. This is Endeavor. Com check.
And SpaceX has you loud and clear, Endeavor.
And Houston has you loud and clear.
And the space station has you loud and clear on hardline. We copy it all on hardline. Loud and clear.
All right, so the same control teams that we've been hearing through the approach and docking phase of the flight on the big loop. That includes the SpaceX flight controllers in Mission Control Hawthorne. The voice you're hearing is Core or Crew Operations and Resource Engineer Arthur Berryalt. He confirmed from here in Hawthorne. From Mission Control Houston, Capcom Kathy Bolt confirmed the hardline communication network is working on board the International Space Station. That was the voice of Victor Glover, who is currently working through the procedures for opening up the hatches, including the repressurization of the vestibule. Still awaiting some temperature equalization there before that begins. But that'll be some of his next steps. And then aboard Crew Dragon Endeavor, Commander Shane Kimbrough confirming that hardline communication is working. So we got good power and good communication through the umbilical line to the Dragon from the International Space Station. We'll continue to provide periodic updates throughout this sequence of repressurizing the vestibule and opening up the hatches, configuring the Dragon and the International Space Station as they are mated together in space.
SpaceX Endeavor for some reports on 4.400 when you're ready.
SpaceX is ready to copy for 4.400.
Okay, for tablet percentage, MS177, CDR 84, PLT 87, MS279.
All right, SpaceX copies. Reading back, tablet power is MS177, CDR is 84, PLT is 87, and MS2 is 79.
Good readback.
Station Houston on 2. We've had a good vestibule pressurization and leak check. You are go to pick up and ingress part 2, step 3.
All right, that's great news. Picking up in part 2, step 3 for ingress. Thanks.
you're just now joining us, you are watching the live broadcast for the Crew 2 mission for SpaceX and NASA. The Crew 2 Dragon Endeavour has docked to the International Space Station. They're currently working some procedures to process opening the APAS hatch, which is the hatch on the International Space Station side, as well as the hatch on the Dragon, Crew Dragon, prior to crew ingress onto the space station. And what you're looking at on your screen is Crew Dragon Endeavour docked to the International Space Station. We are hearing some call-outs as they're walking through some procedures, so we're keeping up with the teams. Again, this process does take a bit of time.
So if you're just joining us, the Dragon itself is attached to the International Space Station. The crew inside, namely Victor Glover, is making incremental steps to open up the hatches between the International Space Station and the Dragon itself. Glover waited for thermal equalization of the vestibule in between each of the hatches, the station side and the Dragon side. After thermal equalization, he brought it up to about 5 pounds per square inch, performed a leak check, and everything looked good, so he proceeded to increase the vestibule pressure to equalize with the International Space Station's pressure. With vestibule pressurization complete, and after a few checks, Glover will be given the go to open up the station side hatch, the APAS hatch. Once that's open, he'll be able to see the Crew 2 astronauts inside the Dragon Endeavour. There's a small window on the Dragon hatch that he'll be able to see them. And his main job before opening up that hatch will be configuring the station side hatch. That hatch is configured with a docking target. It's a small rod with an X on the end that provided guidance for the Dragon during its approach to dock with the International Space Station. He'll remove that docking target and provide some padding to allow safe entry into the International Space Station for the Crew 2 astronauts.
Victor Glover is one of the NASA astronauts that flew on Crew 1 about 6 months ago. So he is the one preparing, who has been preparing the space station for Crew 2's arrival. This is Victor's first mission on the International Space Station, and first time that he has been to space, so it's pretty cool that he gets to welcome the Crew 2 team and help get them on board the space station.
And Station Houston on 2 for Node 2 video. Yeah, we were wondering if we could get permission to come on board in Node 2.
You're welcome. Please come on board.
Okay, and we'll need the high-def camera powered on.
All right, so we've been very lucky with some of the external views here. This coming from a camera on the Japanese exposed facility pointing at the forward end of the International Space Station where the Dragon is currently docked. Crew Dragon Endeavour. Very shortly, with permission from Victor Glover, we should be getting some views from the inside of the International Space Station and seeing what Victor Glover is up to. He's at the forward end, inside the pressurized mating adapter, going through his procedures to configure the APAS hatch, getting it ready to open. We did hear confirmation earlier that the vestibule is pressurized between the two hatches, those hatches being the station hatch and the Dragon hatch.
Looks like we got that live view on the station.
I think that's Soichi Noguchi on board the International Space Station. Colonel Mike Hopkins, NASA astronaut and commander of the Crew 1 Dragon Resilience, coming into frame as well. There are 7 crew members currently aboard the International Space Station, not counting the Crew 2 astronauts who are on the other side of that hatch. Once that hatch is open, there will be 11 crew members on board the International Space Station. Sort of forget that you don't really need to be in an upright position to work from this orientation. We're looking sort of in an upright position. If you look down or nadir from this position, you would go straight down towards the Earth, but you can see clearly Soichi Noguchi upside down. Mike Hopkins was just upside down. You don't really need to be in a particular orientation to work.
Coming into frame, that is Victor Glover.
And there's Mark Vandehei from NASA, who arrived earlier this month on the Soyuz MS-18 rocket launching from Kazakhstan, with 2 Russian cosmonauts, Oleg Novitsky and Pyotr Dubrov. They'll be joining for the welcome ceremony to welcome the Crew 2 astronauts aboard as well.
Another thing to point out, you could see that each of them are just wearing socks. Don't really need shoes to be on the space station, since they're not really walking anywhere. They're floating around.
Yeah, they use their hands really to propel themselves from module to module, but their feet, you can see some of the blue handrails situated around the International Space Station. Ooh, there's a good shot of how astronauts typically use those handrails. They'll wrap their feet underneath them to stabilize them. Looks like the pressurized mating adapter is used for some stowage, so there's looks like Noguchi and Glover are reconfiguring some of the stowed items to allow some room to open up the APAS hatch, the hatch on the